At 5:10 on May 17, 2026, a Russian armored column of 8 vehicles entered a narrow forest road, believing the route was clear. Seconds later, the lead tank rolled over a mine that had been planted overnight by Ukrainian drones. A massive explosion tore through the road, throwing dirt, smoke, and fragments into the air. The vehicles behind it stopped at once, trapped in a corridor already watched by reconnaissance UAVs. Within minutes, Ukrainian artillery began striking both ends of the route, while FPV drones moved in to target immobilized tanks and IFVs. What looked like a simple advance became a carefully prepared ambush. In this episode, we will break down how UAVs, FPV drones, drone-dropped mines, HIMARS, and artillery are changing the battlefield in 2026. If you enjoy detailed analysis of modern drone warfare, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and let's begin. 1:05 a.m. Before the first explosion ever came, the battle had already begun in silence. A Ukrainian reconnaissance UAV crossed above a narrow forest road roughly 11 kilometers from the front line. Its task was not to strike. It was to watch, measure, and wait. For almost 52 minutes, the drone circled above the area, recording fresh track marks, broken branches, heat traces near the tree line, and several temporary vehicle stops. The footage showed that Russian armored groups had been using the same route repeatedly, believing the forest canopy gave them enough cover from Ukrainian observation. 1:48 a.m. The pattern was clear. Instead of moving in one large formation, Russian forces had begun splitting their columns into smaller groups of 6 to 9 vehicles. Each group usually included at least 1 tank, 2 IFVs, 1 APC, and a support vehicle fitted with an electronic warfare suite. On paper, that made the movement safer. In reality, it created a predictable rhythm. The UAV also detected 3 possible waiting areas where vehicles slowed down before entering the road. One of them was used twice in a single morning. That mistake gave Ukrainian operators exactly what they needed: timing. 2:29 a.m. no FPV drone was sent into attack yet. No artillery was called in. The Ukrainian crews simply marked the coordinates, studied the gaps between the trees, and calculated where the convoy would be most exposed. The ambush was not built around speed, it was built around patience. By the time Russian armor entered the forest road again, the most important part of the operation had already been completed. 3:06 a.m. After hours of observation, the first strike did not come against the main armored group. Ukrainian operators chose a smaller target first, one that looked less important but could change the movement of the entire column. A Russian logistics truck appeared at the edge of the forest road, roughly 8.7 kilometers behind the forward line. From above, the reconnaissance UAV spotted several covered crates in the rear compartment, along with 2 soldiers moving around the vehicle. The truck was not heavily armored, but it was traveling close to a support vehicle fitted with an EW system, which meant the approach had to be fast and precise. 3:41 a.m. a Ukrainian FPV drone moved in low, using the tree line as cover. The pilot did not fly directly toward the target. Instead, he curved around the side, avoided the strongest interference zone, and aimed for the rear section where the cargo was packed closest together. The impact came seconds later. A sharp explosion burst from the back of the truck, followed by a larger flash as the stored material began to burn. The blast was not large enough to destroy the whole road, but it was powerful enough to stop the vehicles behind it. Smoke rolled across the narrow route, forcing the crews to slow down and look for another way forward. 4:12 a.m. That was the real purpose of the attack. The destroyed truck was only the beginning. Russian drivers, believing they had just avoided a small FPV ambush, shifted toward a second forest route about 1.4 kilometers to the east. What they did not know was that this road had already been watched, measured, and marked by Ukrainian UAVs during the night. This was the trap taking shape. If you enjoy clear breakdowns of modern battlefield tactics, subscribe to the channel and stay with us because the next chapter begins with the main explosion, the moment the entire armored column enters the kill zone. 5:08 a.m. a massive explosion tore through the forest road. The lead Russian tank had just rolled into a minefield seeded overnight by Ukrainian drones. The blast lifted the front of the vehicle, shattered the track assembly, and threw a wall of soil and smoke across the narrow route. For a few seconds, the entire column disappeared behind dust and burning debris. This was the main strike. 5:31 a.m. The Russian group consisted of 9 vehicles, 2 tanks, 3 IFVs, 2 APCs, 1 engineering vehicle, and 1 logistics truck following behind. After the first tank was disabled, the rest of the column had almost no room to maneuver. Trees blocked both sides of the road, while the damaged vehicle in front turned the route into a choke point. A reconnaissance UAV was already above the area, transmitting coordinates in real time. Within minutes, Ukrainian artillery began landing behind the column, cutting off the easiest withdrawal path. The first shells did not need to destroy every target. Their purpose was to hold the vehicles inside the prepared zone. 6:04 a.m. 1 IFV tried to push around the burning lead tank. It moved less than 40 meters before a second mine detonated under its left side. The vehicle stopped at an angle, blocking even more of the road. A Ukrainian FPV drone then approached from behind the tree line and struck near the engine compartment, setting off a fire that forced the crew to abandon the vehicle. Another tank, protected by overhead armor and side screens, survived the first FPV strike. The drone hit the outer frame and exploded without stopping it. A second drone damaged part of the protective structure, but the vehicle still kept moving slowly. 6:37 a.m. Then the weakness appeared. A section of the top cover had been torn open by the previous impacts. The next FPV drone changed angle, climbed slightly above the road, and dived into the exposed gap. The internal detonation was immediate. Flames burst from the hatch area, followed by a deep secondary blast from inside the hull. From the outside, the tank still looked almost intact, but its combat capability was gone. By the time the smoke cleared, the column had lost momentum completely. The ambush had worked exactly as planned. 8:03 a.m. After the Forest Road ambush, Ukrainian reconnaissance UAVs did not return to base immediately. One of them pushed deeper behind the line, searching for targets that could influence the wider sector. The next objective was no longer a tank or an IFV. It was long-range firepower. At roughly 63 kilometers from the forward positions, the drone located a Russian Smerch MLRS parked near a tree-covered service road. The launcher was partially hidden, but its size and shape were unmistakable. The coordinates were passed to a HIMARS crew, 8:46 a.m. The strike came without warning. One precision rocket hit close enough to tear through the launcher and ignite the remaining munitions. A heavy fireball rose above the tree line, followed by a shockwave that pushed smoke outward in a wide circle. For a weapon system designed to strike from far behind the front, the Smerch had been eliminated before it could reposition. 9:22 a.m. Soon after, another UAV identified a Grad MLRS moving out from cover. The vehicle appeared to be preparing to leave its firing position, but it still carried rockets on the rails. A Ukrainian FPV drone was sent in from low altitude and struck the rear section. The explosion was far larger than expected. Burning fragments scattered across the clearing, and a nearby support truck, parked about 24 meters away, was also disabled by the blast. 10:07 a.m. A third target, an Oregon MLRS, was found on elevated ground overlooking the sector. The hit was not perfectly centered, but the fragments and pressure wave were enough to render the system unusable. In a single morning, UAVs had turned hidden launchers into exposed targets, and precision weapons made every coordinate count. 11:18 a.m. By late morning, the battlefield had shifted into a different contest. It was no longer only a matter of who had more tanks, IFVs, or APCs. The decisive question was, who could adapt faster? The drone teams searching for weak points, or the crews trying to protect their vehicles from above? Russian engineers had added more overhead armor, side screens, improvised cages, and electronic warfare suites to their vehicles. Some tanks now carried layered metal frames that extended more than 80 centimeters above the turret. In several cases, a single vehicle could survive 3 or 4 FPV hits before losing mobility. 12:02 p.m. But protection was never perfect. One IFV moved through a damaged village with its EW system active. The first FPV drone lost signal just before impact, but the pilot had already built enough speed. The drone continued forward on momentum and slammed into the rear section, forcing the vehicle to stop. The crew escaped, leaving the IFV damaged but not destroyed. A second drone approached carefully, hovering near the edge of the jamming zone. The pilot adjusted the angle, dropped lower, and sent the FPV straight into an open hatch. Minutes later, flames spread through the interior, and the vehicle could no longer be recovered. 12:49 p.m. This is where fiber optic FPV drones changed the equation. They were slower and usually limited to around 4.6 kilometers, but electronic warfare could not cut their signal. One Russian armored vehicle was found inside a covered shelter, protected from ordinary FPV attacks. Its EW system was active, but the hatch had been left open. With a stable video feed, the pilot guided the fiber optic drone directly into the exposed point. 1:36 p.m. At the same time, heavy bomber drones remained valuable. One T-90 ProRiv hidden under trees required 9 separate munition drops before it was finally disabled. The cost was still far lower than the target itself. The lesson was clear. Armor could delay drones. EW could disrupt them. But one small gap was often enough to decide the outcome. 2:18 p.m. While armored vehicles were being hunted near the front, Ukrainian UAV operators were also looking for something even more important: logistics. A tank without fuel is only a heavy machine. An artillery battery without shells is only a position on the map. A reconnaissance UAV spotted a small fuel train moving through occupied territory, protected by a mine-resistant platform in front of the locomotive and several armed guards near the first cars. Attacking the lead section would have been difficult and likely ineffective. The weaker target was farther back: the fuel tank cars. 2:57 p.m. The first FPV drone struck one of the rear tank cars. A bright flash appeared along the side, followed by thick black smoke rising above the rail line. The train slowed almost immediately. Then more drones arrived, hitting separate cars one after another. Within less than 40 minutes, at least 6 fuel cars were burning. Ukrainian analysts later estimated that more than 96,000 liters of fuel were either destroyed or made unusable. For a mechanized force, that is not just a fire. That is lost movement, delayed repairs, and several days of disrupted operations. 3:42 p.m. The same pattern appeared with ammunition. A UAV followed a Russian supply vehicle for nearly 13 kilometers until it reached a camouflage transfer point near a tree line. The site appeared ordinary from above, but thermal traces and vehicle movement revealed the real purpose. Mortar rounds, mines, and artillery shells were being unloaded there. An FPV drone was sent into attack from low altitude. The hit triggered a powerful secondary detonation, tearing open part of the tree line and scattering smoke across the storage area. The result was clear. A supply point meant to support days of fire missions was gone in seconds. 4:26 p.m. In my view, this is the most important lesson from the entire story. Drones are not only changing how vehicles are destroyed, they are changing how armies move, supply, hide, and survive. The battlefield is no longer divided clearly between the front line and the rear area. What do you think? Will future battles be decided more by FPV drones, fiber optic FPV drones, HIMARS guided by UAVs, or by the next generation of EW and counter-UAS systems? Leave your thoughts in the comments.